So I'm going to react to a video that was suggested to me in my Discord called The 5 Levels of Jazz Improvisation. I haven't watched it, but of course this is interesting to me. Let's check it out.
The 5 Levels of Jazz Improvisation. Improvisation in music is the act of spontaneously playing something that hasn't been previously planned or composed. In fact, in many ways, it is simply composition sped up. Some people find the idea of any kind of improvisation to be pretty intimidating.
Maybe put my... There, that's probably better.
But I think that anyone can learn to do it because it's something that you do all the time. When you tell a story or have a conversation and you haven't pre-written or memorized what you're saying, you're improvising. You've probably got some broad ideas in mind that you're trying to convey, but it's not worked out ahead of time. You're just talking.
Okay, so that's interesting because I agree with this. But I wonder if he goes the same direction that I would go with this example, because what he's basically saying here is that playing an improvised jazz solo, I want to keep it to jazz because this video is also about jazz. Of course, I know there's improvisation in Turkish music, in Indian music, in I don't know, all other kinds of music that have improvisation, but they don't all follow the same rules or aesthetics. So let's keep it to jazz. So improvising a jazz solo is like telling a story. And I agree with it, but for specific reasons. One of the reasons is that if you tell a story in English, let's say, and you want the other people to understand what you're saying, so not only the story itself, right, like what's happening in the story, but also what you're saying, you have to use words that everybody knows. Not only that, you actually have to use them in certain orders, following certain rules for other people to understand it, right? So if you just start making up words or use very weird word orders or don't follow the rules of the grammar, then some people might still be able to understand you, but actually not listen to the story anymore because it's very confusing what you're saying. So in that way, I think jazz is similar. Or when you play an improvised solo, improvised doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want. It's not like you're making up everything about what you're doing. No, you still have to play certain kind of words, vocabulary, and also certain kind of sentences according to certain rules for other people to actually understand what is happening. Other jazz musicians or people that are used to listening to jazz, they have to know what's happening, or they have to recognize that you also know these rules for them to actually follow the story.
You're able to draw from your massive vocabulary and compose sentences on the spot that make sense and convey meaning. Conversely, in music, there are only a few notes to choose from, so it should be a lot easier to play something that makes sense and even sounds pretty good. But if you're in a band and it's your turn to take a solo, and you're just supposed to make something up, how do you do that?
Good. Yeah, I agree with that.
Now, it should go without saying that anything you play should be in time, in tune, and with a good sound. That's just basic musicality and control of your instrument. So you just...
Let's say in time, in tune with a good sound. I think this is very important. He goes past it very quickly. So let's stick to guitar. And let's start with the in tune. I mean, just tune your guitar, right? Or if you have a guitar that has bad intonation, then make sure the intonation is correct. So it's not very relevant for us guitar players. I'm going to assume that nowadays everybody has a tuner on their phone and your guitar is in tune. So maybe that's more important for other instruments like string instruments or woodwinds or horn players. But in time, I think we have to be a little bit more specific about this. And who knows, maybe he's going to get more specific. But in time doesn't just mean that you are always at the same spot as the rhythm section, right? That's not enough. You actually have to play with swing timing. So that means that you have to have a very specific idea on how you're going to play eighth notes. Like if you play a phrase like 1, 2, 3, 4, then you have to be in control of how long all of these notes are in relationship to each other. So a swing rhythm is like long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short. And good timing means that this is very consistent. So how long the long notes are and how short the short notes, that's your choice, right? Some people like this long short to be more exaggerated, but as long as all your short notes are the same length as every other short note and every long note, same length. So you don't want to go from very short, very long notes to even notes, and then a little bit short, a little bit long. You want to have this consistent swing feel, 3, 4. So I'm not sure if he's going to go into that, but I think that's part of timing. And good sound, of course, but what is good? There's many different kinds of sounds. That depends a little bit on the aesthetics of your instrument in the history of the music. For instance, if I think about trumpet or something, a jazz trumpet sound is not necessarily the same as a classical trumpet sound. Same for saxophone. Like for instance, in saxophone, classical saxophone, there's a lot of vibrato, but in jazz saxophone, there's not that much vibrato. Or also the sound has more edge in jazz, right? So a good sound, I think, should be a good jazz sound then. But I understand what he's saying.
Just have to choose what notes to play and what rhythms to play. And in my experience working with new improvisers, rhythm is not that big a deal, while notes tend to be far more mystifying and intimidating. So that's what this video is going to focus on. And how you do decide what notes to play depends on how far you've progressed in what I think of as the 5 levels of improvisation in music. And while the levels are sequential,
okay, I'm gonna make my screen a little bit smaller because I'm always on the top of the text. Like this better.
Also cumulative, and even sort of loop around on each other. And while the progression of complexity is probably what you would expect, the role of intuition may not be. Level 1 is all about playing by ear, and it's basically 100% intuition. There is a rare species of musician who are natural improvisers. They engage with the music fearlessly and seem to effortlessly come up with brilliant musical ideas, but maybe don't know much about chords or theory. Some people never get out of level 1, and they don't need to because they sound awesome.
So a famous example, of course, I can think of 2. Chet Baker is one that apparently didn't know anything about theory or about harmony or about even the chords he was playing. But if you listen to his solos, they all sound fantastic. Of course, good sound, good timing, but also the lines were very harmonically interesting. Although there is a recording that he plays Have You Met Miss Jones together with Stan Getz. And then you can hear on the bridge that he has trouble playing on that bridge. The bridge is, of course, very weird. Now, I don't know what the reason for that is. Maybe he was had a bad time or he didn't sleep well. I don't know, whatever. But you can hear on the bridge that he doesn't understand what's happening there. But it's very rare because there's lots of difficult tunes that Chet Baker plays fantastic on. So that's one example. Another example, I think, is Paul Desmond, saxophone player of Dave Brubeck. He had a great sound, great time. What's that? Oh, okay, sorry. Paul Desmond, he had great sound, great timing. But if you listen to his solos, listen to the album that he made with Jim Hall, that it's not so harmonically sophisticated as Chet Baker, for example, but also not as a lot of other saxophone players in his time, like his peers, like Lee Konitz, right? Also from cool jazz. Wayne Marsh. Wayne Marsh. Is Wayne Marsh a saxophone player? Maybe he's a guitar player. I don't know. But people from his time, Charlie Parker, like they are much more harmonically advanced. So I think in the case of Paul Desmond, even though he was of course a good player and he played really nice solos, he had this limit that he couldn't get past. Chet Baker didn't seem to have a limit, except for maybe that bridge of Have You Met Miss Jones. Now, if you go to gypsy jazz, there's this confusion that a lot of people think that the Sinti actually play like this, that they just play by ear. But they don't, right? They don't know the names of what they are playing. That's a different thing. So they know the shapes on the guitar, right? They know, okay, this is the first chord. I can play this for the first chord of a minor blues in G. But I can also play this as the first chord of Celebrate Starlight. Right? They wouldn't know it's E half diminished or G minor 6 or C7, right? This could be many things. But they do know where it is in the tune, and they also know that if you play this shape, I can play these kinds of phrases. It's exactly the same thing as somebody that does know theory. The only difference is they don't know the names. Well, actually, not even that, right? They actually do use names, but it's names that they invented themselves to talk with each other. It's not very convenient names. For instance, like they would just play this shape on their hand or something, and then they would say they would have a word for major and minor. They would call it, I think, half and whole or something like that. I've seen them do it many times. It's like no, and then they say a word, and then the shape changes. Now it's not very handy because if they play with non-Sinti or even with Sinti from another country, it's very difficult to communicate. So I know many of the Sinti that actually would wish that they would just know the regular names, because that would make it so much easier to play with a non-Sinti. And there are, of course, now the younger generation that does know. Not many, but some, like Gizmo Graaf is one. In Germany, there are a couple. Gizmo Graaf, what's the violin player's name? I forgot his name, but I'll put it in the screen. And in the Netherlands, where I'm from, are there... As far as I know, I don't know any Sinti personally, like Moses Rosenberg, that know the names. But I know that they all wish they would know it, right? Paul Schaefer had told me many times, man, I wish I would know it. Can you teach me? And then we started, but then it's so much information about things that he already knows on the guitar, then to learn all of that, it's just too much, right? He doesn't also need it. The only reason he would need it is to communicate with other people. Now, in Gypsy Jazz, there is actually a class of musicians that are ear players, and it's mostly violin players. And this is both good and bad. The good thing about it is that it enables violin players that are, of course, not used to playing jazz, right? The violin is not an instrument that usually is played in jazz, to come quickly into this music. And there's many guitar players and they need a violin player. So if they can find a violin player in their city or something that likes to play this music and can hear form, right? They understand how the form works of a jazz tune, like when you have to play a solo, when your solo ends, and they can swing and they have good sound. It's usually enough for guitar players to play with this violin player because they need one. But the bad thing about it is that now it has become kind of accepted for violin players to actually not play the changes of the tunes. I know Matt Holborn has a channel and he also talks about this sometimes. And he talks a lot about, guys, you got to play the changes. And I say that too. But I've kind of given up on this because it just seems to be accepted for violin players not to play the changes. I hate it when I hear it, but this happens until the highest levels. And I'm talking about like professional players that play on big stages with big names. And for some reason, a lot of guitar players don't seem to be able to hear it when the violin player is just playing random stuff, right? I don't want to say the word, but it's bull, because if I say the word, maybe it's gonna be, it's not good for the YouTube algorithm. But I hear this all the time, and it really bothers me. For instance, like when you play Limehouse Blues is in G, but starts on C7. So don't play a B natural on that first 4 bars, but it happens all the time. And I have a real problem with it, but it is what it is.
Most of us aren't so lucky and need a bit more study and guidance.
Sander Roy, thank you. Sander Roy is the name. You already saw it on the screen, but Sander Roy, I was looking, he's a Sinti that knows everything. But that's because, of course, he studied at university. David Ritter is mentioned here also. Okay, I didn't know that. Another name, Cha Limberger. Cha knows, and he's a real Sinti, but I asked him, like, how do you know all of this? But he was taught by a non-Sinti from a young age, all of this stuff.
To improvise well. But everyone still needs level 1, because there's nothing more important in improvisation than using your ears. And basically everyone has some intuitive understanding that some choices in music are very consonant, while others...
There's nothing more important in jazz improvisation than using your ears. Yes and no. I don't know what that means exactly. After that he says, or I have the feeling that he correlates it with intuitive playing. If that is his definition of using your ears, then I agree with it. But then I have a specific meaning of the word intuitive in this context. It would mean for me that you only play what comes in the moment when you improvise. It's like when you practice at home, of course, you're practicing all these concepts and these certain phrases, licks, right, or scales, and you make an effort to play that, maybe with a backing track or with a metronome. But when you're at the gig, you shouldn't do that. You should only play what comes to mind in the moment. And hopefully what comes to mind in the moment is stuff that you practiced. But usually it's not stuff that you practiced yesterday. It's stuff that you practiced years ago and that you have lots of experience playing. In that sense, I totally agree with, use your ears. Because you could say it's what comes to mind or it's what you hear, right? But if it means like it's lines that you hear in your head and it's lines that you've never played before and you just find them on your instrument, I don't agree, because usually that goes, there's two things that can happen, or three things. The first thing is, we talk about Chet Baker, right? It's all genius, but it's very rare, right? There's very few examples in jazz history of people that were able to do it. The second thing is that you are able to do it, but it messes with your timing and your sound, or most of your timing, because you spend so much time trying to play what's in your head and trying to find it that you lose the time. Because timing is something that you need to be hyper-focused on all the time to be able to sound good all the time. Because you're playing with a band, and the band gives you the quarter note pulse, right? The 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And it can speed up a little bit, can slow it down. A lot of stuff can happen. Maybe everybody sits out and it's only the bass playing on the 1 and 3, or it's the height on the 2 and 4, whatever it happens. You need to be able to identify that pulse, that quarter note pulse, to time your eighth notes as consistently as possible. And the third thing that can happen is that you actually cannot find it, and it also messes with your timing. And the fourth thing that can happen is that you do find it, but the lines are actually not very interesting.
Others have a lot of dissonance or tension. But tension and dissonance aren't necessarily bad. In fact, the balance between tension and release is really important in music. And you may notice how some notes want to go up to resolve, while others sound more satisfying when they go down.
Yeah, so of course, it's all completely true. I don't like these kinds of examples in a video about jazz, because this is obviously very classical music. And now you could say, okay, but that's the basis for jazz, right? The harmony. Yes and no. All of these four-part harmony examples, they don't really work like that in jazz. Now, some people say, no, it does work like this. Not really, because especially if you play guitar, right, and you play something like, which is completely accepted, it doesn't work like that, because, for instance, I play two A7s, and then this flat 9 doesn't happen in classical music. Goes to the root of A7, which is already very weird, and then this resolution here, look, the C sharp is there, right? It doesn't resolve up to a D. I don't play this. I don't play. Why not? Because that sounds like classical music. I do. And that C sharp just stays for the D major 7. So that's why I don't like these examples. It's not jazz harmony. This is classical harmony, and that's not the same thing. Even though a lot of people say that's the same thing, it's also taught like that in universities. It's not the same thing. Resolutions don't work the same way. Now, if it talks about the lines, like the line that's written here, right? Yeah. But in jazz, you could easily do, right? You could go down to a 6 on C, or you could even let the B stay, and then you stay on the B to get the C major 7 arpeggio. You get. So that's why if I give examples, or if I would give examples in a video like this, I would make sure it's all jazz harmony, and then I couldn't actually make the same points.
And if you're not sure how to resolve a tension, you should know you're only ever a semitone away from a resolution to a tension.
Yeah. So this is funny that he says that here, because I've been taught the same thing when I took jazz lessons. Like, well, if you play a wrong note, you can always just play half step up, half step down, and you have a right note. This is in theory correct, but to be honest, this sounds awful. If you listen to this, it sounds completely unmusical. Sounds like you're making a mistake all the time, especially because the harmony underneath it is pop harmony. So if you play like this, let's say you get hired for a pop band that they hire you, and you play a solo like this, that's your last gig. So yes, it's true in theory, but in practice, it doesn't really work like that. But I'm sure he's gonna get to that. We're still at level 1, right?
With practice and experimentation, you'll learn to hear and resolve these tensions quickly. But I do think it's important to remember that there really are no objectively right or wrong choices here. There's no forbidden or brown note that's going to make something explode if you play it wrong. It's a bit like deciding what to have on your sandwich. Some choices are going to be more traditional, while others are going to be more adventurous, but you do you.
Yes, but I don't think we can talk about single notes here. Now we have to talk about a range of notes. Like, Django, there's this 2-5-1 phrase, or 5-1 phrase that Django plays. Let's say 2-5-1 to C. Django plays 1, 2, 3, 4. So he plays C major arpeggio, D flat, but it's all on a C chord. Now, of course, you could say, well, but he's thinking the tritone. Doesn't matter. The accompaniment is just playing C. So this is, you say, it's all wrong notes, but it's just a major arpeggio that he's shifting up and back down. So we're not talking about one note. He's not playing, or he's not playing that. He's playing a range of notes that make an inherent harmony on its own, right? There's another chord suggested here. There's a D flat chord suggested. So he's suggesting, even though it's not happening in the rhythm section. So that's more adventurous. It's not just one note. It seems a little bit like he's talking about one note, but I think you have to now talk about a selection of notes that actually has an inherent logic to it.
Sure, you could burn the toast, and most people won't like that. But the analogous situation to that is more like playing out of time with a poor sound rather than an objectively bad note. So, fill your ears. Improvising musicians need to listen to bands and soloists from genres that they want to play to try to figure out what kinds of sounds fit and what don't. And
that's exactly right, of course. That's very important.
Back to sandwiches, it's a bit like learning what kinds of things usually go well together. And if you mix it up, well, it really depends on your own tastes if you find it interesting or just kind of weird. So, try a note and see if that works, and go up or down a semitone if you need to. Then try another note, and before you know it, you'll have tried all 12 pitches and probably come up with a pool of notes that sound pretty good. And all of a sudden, now you're in level 2.
Okay.
Level 2.
Yeah, I was, of course, critical, but he was talking about level 1, and he was trying to find a way for people that don't want to spend or front load a lot of theory and harmony knowledge to find a way to way in. And I agree with that, right? Level 1, you're just trying out stuff. Completely in agreement there.
Use a scale or key. Most songs are made up of a variety of chords, but more often than not, these chords are going to be related to each other because they all tend to come from one key or scale. For instance, all these songs all have chords that come from the key of G major. Mm-hmm. So you can just use the notes of the G major scale to improvise, and whatever you play is going to sound probably pretty good. Depending on the type of song you're playing, you might find another type of scale works well.
Probably, he says probably pretty good. I think he's referring there to avoid notes, right? If you do this, if you improvise in this way, you're in a tune in G. So there's G, there's C, there's D. Then on the D, if you play the G major scale, you kind of want to avoid the G itself. You want to avoid that note. It's called avoid note. So if you improvise with that scale, just go past that note. Don't stop. Don't play. You want to end on F sharp. So that's called avoid notes. And there's, for every chord, you can point out some avoid notes in the scale. Even for the G chord itself, you kind of want to avoid the C. You want to end on a B or D.
But level 2 is basically about having an awareness that you can often just use one scale to guide your note choices for improvisation, and it's going to sound pretty good.
True, yeah.
Now, since this is level 2, it really helps to know a little bit of music theory, like knowing the basic pattern of major scales, and how that pattern relates to different kinds of minor scales, and to other kinds of scales. Check my channel for videos about these scales if you need to brush up on anything. And I even did one on how to learn all your scales in all 12 keys in just 24 hours with a really powerful practice technique and method to track your progress. Check the description for links.
This is all true, and I think it's all good. Now, I have never practiced any scales, and some people find that surprising. Most people that have never seen a video by me or don't know me. I remember playing at a gig, and then a guitar player, I didn't know that, but later he said, what skills are you using in general? I said, I don't use any skills. He said, what do you mean? What do you play then? I said, well, I just play phrases and licks. And he said, but they consist of skills, right? I said, yeah, maybe. But here's the thing. I've never practiced the skills behind the phrases. I've practiced the phrase itself, and I've practiced how to vary the phrases, how to be creative with the phrases itself. And sometimes that could result in using different skills. Who knows? But my basis is not phrases, not skills, but phrases. Now, if you only practice skills, in the end, you're still probably going to end up finding phrases inside those skills. So it would lead to the same point. I just wonder what the quickest way is. I'm not even talking about the best way, because I think both ways could lead to completely satisfying results, and you can see it from practice. I know tons of musicians that have only practiced phrases and that play at the highest level, and I know many musicians that started out with skills and play at the highest level. I'm just wondering what the quickest way is, and in that sense, I think starting with phrases or starting with solos, transcriptions, is probably the quicker way, because it will give you faster results. I'm not talking about better, just faster.
In the meantime, don't panic, because you don't need to know all these scales to get started. You only need to know the scale you need to know to improvise on a specific tune. So, how do you know what scale to use? First, your teacher or someone else in the band who knows all the chords might be able to tell you what scale to use. Or use those ears that you developed in level 1. Just listen to the song and experiment until you figure out what notes and scales work best by process of elimination. There are only 12 notes to try and 12 possible major scales they can fit into. And you can probably figure out what scale works if you just try.
I agree with it. Of course, he has to make 5 levels, right? He has to say something per level, but you're never going to sound like a jazz musician, because even not like a bassist jazz musician, because one of the things about jazz is actually the use of one of the most important things about playing like a jazz musician is that you use chromaticism in a very specific way, right? One way could be enclosures, or it could be like passing notes. So if you ask a jazz musician, what scale can I use on this entire tune, they're gonna laugh. They said that's not possible. You cannot play just G major on I Can Give You Anything But Love. If you're only gonna play G major, you're gonna sound off a lot of the time, right? So he will never get that answer. So I understand he's at level 2, but yeah, I don't think this actually gets you in to sounding like a jazz musician, not even a rudimentary one.
And actually, if you've put the time in to learn all your scales really well, you can figure out what key you're in really, really quickly, because certain notes only fit in certain scales. Like, if C doesn't work but C sharp does, you can rule out a whole bunch of scales. And then you only have to check a couple more notes to quickly narrow down your options to just one scale. This might seem a bit mystifying if you don't know your scales well, but this is just one of the many superpowers you gain by learning all your major scales. More info on that in the description as well. Some songs will modulate to different keys, but it's the same idea. Figure out what scale works in what section, and you'll...
I wonder why until now I've only seen pop tunes and like some kind of classical harmony. We're still like this video is called Jazz Levels, right? So why are we talking about these kind of songs? I bet it's because on these songs maybe it does work to play a single scale. Actually, I don't know these 3 songs. I mean, I Want to Dance with Somebody I've heard, of course, but I don't know the harmony right now.
Have a pool of notes to choose from at any time that are going to sound pretty good. And even jazz, which tends to be really harmonically complicated with lots of different chords, can even be thought of in terms of level 2. That is, different groupings of notes that combine to create various key centers. And when you're comfortable with that and ready to move to a greater level of detail...
Okay, so there's 3 key centers here, F minor, C minor, and D flat major. So if I play C minor scale on the first 2 bars, it's going to sound good. F minor is going to sound good. C minor, yeah, this is going to sound okay. Yeah, this kind of works. This will work, but you see, it's already 3 scales here that you have to know. So you would never get the answer from somebody say, which scale can I use? You would never say 1 scale. It would already give you 3 tonal centers. So it's 3 times as difficult already.
That brings us to level 3, chord theory.
Level 3.
Now, instead of just thinking of a key that a piece or section is in and using an appropriate scale to improvise, you're actually paying attention to what chord is being played at any given moment and what scales and arpeggios work best over that specific chord. If you're playing the blues, rather than just using the blues scale, level 3 would require knowing the arpeggios and scales of all the specific chords used in the blues and trying to incorporate those notes into your improvisations.
Let's look at this chord progression. It's kind of a weird chord progression for a jazz blues. Because this is actually just the chords of a pop blues, right? Or like a blues. C7, F7, C7, F7, C7, and then G7, F7, C7. I'm trying to think of a famous jazz blues that uses these chords. The only one that I could think of right now is Freddie the Freeloader. But then even the last chord is not C7. I think it's B flat 7. So normally I think it's Freddie Freeloader is in B flat, but if you play it in C7, in C, you would get C7, F7, C7. Yeah. So even Freddie Freeloader doesn't really follow this, but most blueses actually don't. Jazz blueses don't follow this progression. The final 4 bars would be a 2-5-1 to C. So the final 4 bars would be D minor 7, G7, C, and then the bar before would be either that. If you talk about the old time blues, like 30s, you get the 1 with the third and bass, 1 diminished chord 2, 2-5-1, or you would get in the Charlie Parker blueses, you would get a 2-5 to D minor. So you would get E half diminished, A7. So then it would be C7, F7. Okay. E half diminished, A7, D minor 7, G7, C.
The blues generally only has 3 chords to worry about, but this is fundamentally a much more detailed, higher resolution understanding of how to navigate improvising over a piece of music. And depending on the tune, you might have...
So I think the tunes that you see now on the screen, which is kind of a departure from the blues we just saw. I mean, Giant Steps especially. I understand why it's on the screen, right? It's an iconic tune, and there's many videos about Giant Steps, even like a documentary. So, like, even if you're new to jazz, you might have heard of that tune. Otherwise, I don't see why it's on the screen, because it's not really widely played in the sense that if you go to a jam session that you have to play Giant Steps all the time. Usually somebody will maybe say it's a joke and nobody wants to play it. So, but the difference with the blues is that I don't think the blues that were just shown on the screen with those chords is actually a good example for the point that was made about outlining each chord. Like if you have a progression, a blues progression like that, let's go back, like this, then I would actually say it's best if you just play the blues scale on this, because these chords are just for a normal blues. There's no 2-5-1 here, which I just showed. A jazz blues has a 2-5-1. So if I would see something like this and they would be playing like a... something like that, I would just play, that's super slow by the way, but then I would actually play... I would stick to blues mostly. Probably sounds best, right? It's the feel. And even on those G7, I would still play that. I would stick to the blues mostly. So I really need a 2-5-1 there to make it a jazz blues, and then it makes sense to outline more chords, right? So if you look at these tunes that were shown here, yeah, this is something completely different. Another big difference between this and the blues is that these tunes that you see now are functional. This is not functional. So blues is actually a modal kind of progression where there is no real one chord or five chord even. It's just all separate chords, all separate sounds that could have their own kind of universe attached to them, but you could also just play blues, C blues on all of them. Like you could do in a modal tune, you could play one kind of scale. And there's no real 5-1 resolution here, right? There's no G to C. There's no G to C, nowhere, right? That's what we need. And in these tunes, it's everywhere. There's 2 5-1s, there's modulation, so that's also a big difference. And most jazz is played on tonal tunes, right, with resolutions. A blues is an exception, but if you play a blues, then you adapt the changes to at least have one of those, but usually two of those 2 5-1s, because in the fourth bar here, most jazz musicians would actually also play G minor 7, C7 to get a 2 5-1 there. Okay, let's continue.
Have quite a few different chord changes to consider. This is a big project because every chord type, and this is just a few, transposes into 15 keys and has its own arpeggio and scale type, as well as notes that we tend to classify as tensions, which sound pretty good, but have tension, and avoid notes, which sound dissonant and should generally only be used as passing tones.
There are the avoid notes I was talking about. Now, this is all true, right? Every chord type has its mode, has its scale that's attached to it. But for instance here, and I assume you might know this, but the C major scale and the C Dorian scale, yeah, they are different. But a C Dorian scale is the same as the B flat major scale, just starting on a C. So yeah, it's two different scales, but it's actually the same scale, start with a different starting note. So that already makes it a little bit easier to understand. Same for the Mixolydian scale. The scale that you see here is just a F major scale, starting on a C. So this is all one scale, right? One kind of system of a scale with different starting notes.
Level 3 improvisers also consider voice leading and guide tones as they move between subsequent chords and often try to highlight those harmonic changes when improvising, such as in the blues. To give you a sense of the difference between level 2 and 3, here's 2 choruses of me improvising on the blues. First in level 2, then level 3.
So I would still say this is just a jazz solo, even though it's only blues scale. It's just because of the timing, right, and the motivic development and stuff. Let's go on. Okay. This is, yeah, I see what he does here. There's more of like the chord in there, especially at the end where there's really like an E flat major triad, right? But I to be honest, I prefer the first solo here, and the reason for that is because this blues progression is just like a traditional blues. Somebody in the chat here is saying it's like the Beatles' "I Feel Fine," right? And then a blues solo makes more sense to me. I'm not saying that this is wrong or something, but I wouldn't say level 2, level 3. I would say actually level 2 in this case, maybe more in the style, although you could make a mix.
Level 3 is a big jump in detail, and we're going to do a deep dive on all these topics and more in subsequent videos. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss them. But for now, just remember that you don't have to learn every chord and every key to get started in level 3 improvisation. You just have to learn the chords in the song you're learning. And if you'd like to have a conversation about these or other musical topics, I teach lessons online. I play trumpet, but I've coached musicians who play all kinds of instruments about all kinds of musical topics. We can work on improvisation, rhythms, sight reading, repertoire, or whatever you like. Visit my website, bradharrison.ca.
That's funny. Star Wars commentary.
For more information. And if you'd like to support this and future videos, please consider becoming a member of my channel or joining my Patreon. One of the perks is access to a huge scale syllabus and a set of play-along practice tracks designed to help you learn all your scales in no time. A bunch of different scales have already been published and more are on the way. Check the description for links to be...
Looks very cool. Yeah, if you're interested in that, I would certainly consider joining this Patreon, because it seems to be very elaborate. I mean, you won't find any of that stuff in my books, but again, because I'm not a skills player in the strict sense that I didn't never practice any skills, but I know plenty of people that have done that and play great. So, you know.
Become a member. Level 4, Substitutions. At this level, in addition to being aware of what chord is being played and what arpeggio and chord scale is indicated, you're also considering substitutions and alterations to add even more color to your improvisations. If you're looking at a major 7 chord, there are a few options, each with their own interesting sound. But dominant chords...
By the way, the graphic work is great. It must have been taking a lot of work, or maybe there's like a new program, some kind of AI thing that can do this, but it's all great. It's moving very smoothly, and yeah, good stuff.
Really have the highest number of common substitutions, and there are probably even a few more that I've forgotten here. We'll get into the details in other videos, but...
Okay, what do we see here for skills? Let me see. Major bebop, yeah. Lydian. Major pentatonic. Yeah, there's all good sounds for C major, although I would say that Lydian is not... Well, no, it's used, but it's not really used in bebop all that much. Not saying that this is a bebop video, but like Lydian is a really specific sound that is... Well, he was saying that's for more advanced stuff. Mixed Lydian, dominant bebop, have whole diminished, Lydian dominant. Okay, so now I moved my screen, but I'm just gonna leave it on the bottom left. And now it's not playing anymore.
And there are probably even a few more that I've forgotten here. We'll get into the details in other videos, but here's an idea of what some of these sound like.
So the weird thing is now, the chords here say D minor 7 G 7 C, but he's playing in B flat. So that's like a trumpet player, right? The trumpet player always plays a whole step down. But I don't understand why it wasn't like that before. But now look at this example. It's like the first line. Yeah, the chord skills are correct. This reminds me of what you also see in the Berkeley method. But do notice that all the notes in the first line are just the C major scale, right? There's 3 different names, but it's all the C major scale. Just D Dorian is the C major scale starting on D. G mixed Lydian is a C major scale starting on G. And a C major, which you can also call, what's the first mode called? Ionian. You could also call that C Ionian or C major. It's all C. And I guess to emphasize that, he's starting every line with that note. But in a real jazz improvisation, you would actually avoid playing the root on beat 1. I mean, avoid sounds like you can never do it. You could do it, but you don't want to do that too often, because that's already information that is played by the bass, for example, right? You want to land on more interesting notes like the 3rd, the 5th, or the 9, or the 6th. So I wouldn't say this is a good... I would never learn this line. I understand why it's here. It's to give a good example for the skills. But in doing that, you're creating a line that's not very interesting. Especially the resolution, which starts on a C and ends on a C. Let's see, the second example, it has the bebop scale. Again, it starts on the root of every note, every scale. And then the third, let's listen to it. Although it's in B flat. So let's look at this line. It's a kind of interesting line. I want to hear it again. So the problem here is also the backing track. The backing track is playing like the most basic chords that you can think of. So it's just the backing track is just playing this G, or it's F7. F7, and then you're playing this G Lydian dominant. That's kind of a clash. I would then also expect a backing track with more advanced chords, and I think it would sound better, because now it just sounds like a wrong note almost to me, just because of the backing track. Also consider that if you play 2-5-1 to B flat, This sound, it's a perfectly valid sound on the 5 chord in a 2-5-1, but it's not really played that much. Right? This sound, this sharp 11 sound, or Lydian dominant sound, is usually reserved for dominance on the 2nd degree. Like, for example, if we play Take the A Train in the key of B flat, and on this, then you would play that note. So I understand this is just an example, but it is weird to hear that. And again, there also it sounds like mistakes, although it's completely correct, but it sounds like mistakes because of the backing track, right? I would expect the backing track to maybe also play an alt chord, or at least play something that is not so so F7-y.
And you can even get into what is known as sidestepping or playing outside the key, which is basically what it sounds like, playing notes that aren't in the key. There's a lot to explore in this topic, but a good way to think of it is playing something in a key, just not the key that's being played at the time.
It's pretty interesting. So the first 8 bars, I think they sound a little bit like Randy Brecker would play. That's interesting. The final 4 bars, I don't think sound that good. Just again, because I would expect a 2-5-1 there. So these changes, they're not asking for this kind of approach. Although I understand the point, it's pretty interesting.
The options for chord and scale substitutions are nearly limitless. And it really does bring us back to the idea that there are no right or wrong notes, only bolder or more conservative choices. And you get to choose what kind of sounds you think are appropriate for the music you want to play. And finally, if that idea...
you can choose, but you still want gigs, right? So you better make sure that the choices you make do fit with some kind of musicians that you want to play with. And I'm joking about it, but that actually means that you need to study specific styles that you're playing. So if you play gypsy jazz, or if you play bebop on R stop or something, you actually need to study some of that vocabulary. Just before this reaction video, I was discussing rules to sound like a 1930s Django. And one of the things that you shouldn't do is play major 7 arpeggios, right? So if you have the C chord, right, C6 or C major 7, it's very natural for modern gypsy jazz players to play major 7 arpeggio. That kind of sound. Sounds very sweet. It's very nice. But actually, Django in the 30s wasn't playing that. Django in the 30s was just more playing major pentatonic stuff, arpeggios, and specific kind of blues things with a minor 3rd and a minor 7th. So as soon as you play a major 7 arpeggio, you're not playing in that style. So let's say you're auditioning for a 1930s jungle band. If you just play your regular stuff, which probably involves a lot of major 7 playing, not only on the major chord, but also on the 2 chord, D minor 7, you're probably going to play F major 7. You probably won't get the job, because even if they might not know the theory of what it is that you're doing, but they might, of course, but maybe they don't, but they can hear, hey, this is not very stylistic. Same the other way around. If you're going to audition to a bebop band and you take your art stop, but you're only a gypsy jazz player, and you're playing like 3 or 2 octave diminished arpeggios on dominance, you're probably not going to get the job, because they're looking more for stuff like... They're looking more for that kind of language, which is very specific language that is bebop language. And you need to study that stuff to get the job. So, yeah, you can make your own choices, but to actually be a working musician, you better make sure that the choices you make are within the realm of what's accepted in a certain style. That might sound uncreative or limiting, but think back about the comparison with language in the beginning. If you want to audition for a play, or like somebody that talks to large audiences, maybe you're like the director of a company or a school or something, you better make sure that the word choices you make and the sentences you make, they are understandable by people that also speak the same language. It's exactly the same point. So yeah, you can make your own choices of words, you can say whatever you want, but better make sure that people understand it.
It brings us right into level 5. If you've gotten here, you've been on a journey. You've learned how to listen and how to play by ear, how to improvise in a key, how to choose scales and arpeggios that fit the chord of the moment, and how to add substitutions to add more harmonic color to your improvisation.
Okay, before we watch level 5, be aware I didn't watch this video, but I really hope here in level 5, it's going to be transcriptions. Because that's the big thing I'm missing here, right? Just playing by ear, key awareness, chord awareness, substitutions. That stuff you could all learn on your own with a book. You don't even have to listen to any music, jazz. Well, he said, of course, it's important to do it. But it wasn't very specific on what you should listen to. I really hope level 5 here it says transcriptions, because otherwise I've been doing it wrong all this time.
Level 5 is the combination of all of these, applied in a new way that is primarily concerned with tension and release.
That's too bad.
And as we alluded to earlier, this level is highly intuitive, and it can be because of all the work you've done to get here. If you were to ask an improviser on another level what they were thinking while they're playing, they can usually offer a reasonably clear explanation appropriate to their level of progress. But in my experience, truly advanced improvisers sometimes struggle to answer such a question with any level of specificity because they're wielding so many different improvisational tools. They're so free from their...
This is true, by the way. But this is mostly because truly good improvisers, but even if you're not a good improviser, it's something you strive for, is to only play what comes to you in the moment. So that you're not thinking too much about what you're going to play, because the moment you start thinking, probably your timing is going to suffer. And that you should avoid that at all costs. Better play something very simple or even wrong, but it's swinging, than have something advanced that you were thinking, like I should play this diminished thing with chromaticism, like it says here. But your timing is wrong. So, yeah, that's probably the reason.
Instrument that the ideas just sort of come out. They're just trying to get from one harmonic point to another. Tension and release is really paramount to music, and really in most art to another. Tension and release is...
I want to look at these text balloons, because of course he thought that himself while making the video. But I'm thinking, did any jazz musician ever say this to me? Some sort of diminished type thing with a bit of chromaticism and a snug in the pentatonic. The C major, you know. Actually, not really. This sounds more like an analysis of a transcription, right? They say, oh, yeah, here's some diminished thing. Oh, there's chromaticism in it. Pentatonic here. Oh, it's really nice. He's releasing that. He's going from the sharp 9. It's going from the sharp 9 up to the major 7, right? Something like that. But anytime I've asked a high-level player, I remember I had lessons on the university with a genius piano player, and I asked him, like, what are you doing here? What are we doing? He could never answer me, but the only thing he would say is, I don't remember. It was something like this, and he played something completely different, which was also great. He said, no. And then this happens all the time. So when somebody is really playing, improvising, and just thinking about, not thinking actually, but just focusing on sound and timing and phrasing, articulation, then it's not really clear what, to them also, or they can't remember even the exact lines. Same for me. Now, I know my vocabulary really well. So, and since I teach this stuff a lot, I probably could remember a lot of it. But if it's really like a gig where I don't have any intention to show something in a workshop, right? Or then I'm free, then I probably won't remember at the end of the solo what I played exactly, right? I might have a general idea, like, okay, I was trying to play triplets at one time or something. Or at one point I thought I should play some chords, right? Something like that. But it's not very cerebral. I think it shouldn't be.
Really paramount to music, and really in most art in general. And going on this journey of learning through these different levels is going to inform your choices in ways that are difficult to describe. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate level 5 because that sort of feels like the height of hubris. But be sure to listen to all the great improvising musicians, and you'll find plenty of examples. Please let me know if the listen to not going levels is going to...
I want to look at this list and see what my 5 levels would be. If I would make this video, what would I put here? Level 1, playing by ear. I would keep that, level 1, playing by ear. But I would actually add key awareness there, because playing by ear without key awareness probably is not going to work. You will find that very fast. You will find out very fast that you need to know the key of the tune. So that's probably going to be in the first 3 days that you play by ear, you find out, okay, what's the key of this tune? Because all the ear players I know, good or bad, they always want to know what the key is. So I say level 1 is actually playing by ear and key awareness. That's the same thing. Level 2, for me, would be that you actually know the chords of the tune. So that's level 3, actually. But I want to be more specific. You know what the chords are of the tune you're playing. So when you're playing, there will never be another U, which is just on screen. You know E flat, then it's a 2/5. It's a D half diminished G7 to C minor. Then it's B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A flat. You know these chords, and you know what the notes are in the chords. So when you improvise, you could play some of those notes. Level 3 for me would be that you not only know the chords in the tune, but also understand what the formulas are behind it. So that you're not going to say D half diminished G7 C minor, but you're going to say 2/5 to C minor, and then 2/5 to A flat. Then there's a backdoor dominant D flat 7, and the reason that you know that is because it will facilitate your thinking in your head. Because if you know it's a 2/5 to C minor, you don't have to think 3 chords. You're thinking about things that resolve to C minor, right? It makes it much easier. That will enable you to play more complicated things. And then level 4 would be, what would level 4 be? Level 4 would be that you can play continuous eighth notes, flowing eighth notes, swinging eighth notes, without stopping. So that's an exercise that you play. There will never be another U. Yeah, should I do it? Okay, so the exercise is I can play only eighth notes, or I can stop, but nothing else. So I cannot play quarter notes or anything. And there's also an exercise where you actually cannot stop, but that is very difficult. So probably will fail if I do it now, especially with tune like this. But let's do it. So I can only play eighth notes. All the notes I play have to be correct, right? Remember, I already have chord awareness, formula awareness, and then I can stop, but nothing else. Let's play a little bit of melody to get the tune in our head. Here we go. Like that, you know. Actually, in the beginning, I think I played a triplet, but you shouldn't do that. That is level 4. And if you, at the top end of level 4, you could do this without stopping. So let me try that. So I have to play continuous 8-note lines, making all the chord changes, and don't stop. Little mess up there, but it was kind of okay. So this is not because this sounds so great. I mean, this is just to show that you are in command of the chord changes with flowing lines, because this will enable you to actually now feel complete freedom and choose to stop sometimes, right? That's level 4. Now, level 5 is you're an artist and you can do all of the stuff before, but now you can actually play interesting solos. And that's because you're playing interesting lines. And now you see there's something missing, and that's level. Actually, I want to say level 0, but maybe we should have 6 levels if we have one. So then there's a level 1.5 or something. But it's actually something that should start before you even start playing jazz. I think is that you should transcribe. And or use transcriptions. Maybe you start out with finding transcriptions. This means that you actually either you look at a written transcription of a jazz solo by a great player, or you make it yourself, or you figure it out from the recording. You don't need any theory for that in the beginning, right? That's why it's in the beginning of the levels. You could just find out the phrase that's being played, and then try to play those phrases yourself on the same tune, right? You find a phrase that Charlie Parker plays, it goes like, right, it's 2-5-1, so E flat 3, 4, right? You figured it out. Of course, you don't know what the 2-5-1 is at that point, maybe, right? It's in the beginning, but you figure that line out, and you think, oh, where he's playing that? Oh, he's playing that in the 4th bar of this tune, and then you find the backing track, and then you play that line there. Or you play it along with the original recording, right? That's also a good idea. And why are you doing this? For several reasons. One is you figured out a line by a great player, so enables you to play something that is great. It gives you a piece of vocabulary that you can use for the rest of your life. And later on, when you start understanding chords and formulas, you will look, oh, like this is played over F-7. Why does it work? Oh, right, so he starts on the 5th. Oh, there's this chromatic from the major 7 of F minor down to the 3rd of B flat. Oh, there's a diminished arpeggio. Oh, that's a great resolution, right? Now, notice that there's no mention of scales in this, in the way I do it, right? I'm just looking more at the notes compared to the chords, and then look at this idea that he has. And then I could maybe change the line somewhat, or come up with my own line that has this in it, for instance, and diminished arpeggio. I think this transcription thing should be added at every level. And for me, it's the most important thing. So the reason it's not here, I'm not sure why, but it could also be because, well, there could be several reasons. But one of the reasons could be, of course, that his method that he's teaching right now doesn't involve that. So if he would say that, then then people would say, why is there no transcription? So I understand that, of course, because what he's talking about, the skills, that they can all be very helpful. But the video was called How Improvisers Improvise, right? And I think actually the transcriptions and the thumbnail said the 5 levels of jazz improvisation. Yeah. So I think that's actually really missing, transcription. And there's lots of people online that emphasize it, Open Studios for one, but I think it's very important. And I'm guessing, I don't know Brett Harrison, but if you talk to him, ask him about it, I bet he says, yeah, transcription is important. Anyway, I think it was a really nicely made video with good points. And check out the video. There's a link in the description. Check out his Patreon if you're interested in the skills. And maybe you disagree with me. That's all fine. Then you can comment that. Okay, this was it. See you all in the next video. Bye.